Hey, what's up guys? In this head-to-head, we looked at full-size framing nailers. Pneumatic nailers first showed up in the 1950s. And while the underlying technology hasn't changed much, features, size, weight, and function have all drastically improved. Even though pneumatic nailers can't replace hammers on our job sites, they've certainly become just as common. Interesting fact, did you guys know that in the early days of pneumatic nailers, there was major kickback issues of the gun? It would really kick back, and it was difficult to overcome for manufacturers. In order to reduce kickback, manufacturers started using a poppet valve. And that originally developed from the ejection seats on fighter pilot planes, which I thought was pretty cool, right? This is essentially the same technology that they're using in pneumatic nailers today. All right, let's talk about the head-to-head testing. Newer building materials, engineered lumber, all that stuff challenge framing nailers these days. Users can become extremely frustrated when you have to follow up a framing nailer by hand-banging proud nails into an LVL beam, right? It's frustrating. Whether you're looking for a new, powerful enough nailer to penetrate engineered lumber, or you're new to the game and you need a do-it-all framing nailer. You know, a lot of remodelers, they have one framing nailer. This head-to-head is going to guide you on making that proper choice. And in our head-to-head evaluation, we looked at nailers that were capable of firing full-size nails, 3.5-inch nails, with a two nail strip capacity. Our criteria was designed to be measurable and realistic in applications that you would do. So we want to give you a good baseline on performance as well as expectations on these nail guns. All right, so for the test, I forget how many nailers we had, but we looked at Bostitch, Craftsman, Makita, Metabo HPT, Milwaukee, Pass Load, Porta-Cable, Rigid, and Senko. 9 nailers. Took me a second to think about that. Out of those 9 nailers, if you really want more information on them, a real deep dive details on model numbers and specs, you have to go to the Toolbox Buzz article on the website. There's way more information there. All right, we looked at features that affect performance and safety. Each tool was ranked 1 to 5, 1 being the best, and that was to determine the best featured ranking. The Milwaukee took first place. Makita was really close on its heels. The team felt that these two nailers were almost equal, with the Milwaukee having a slightly better contact tip. Third place went to Rigid and Senko. Let's look at some of these features. Let's actually do a little bit deeper dive, because that's really what these are all about. As far as nail loading goes, there's top loading, there's also bottom loading. During the evaluation, there was really no consensus among the team as a preference. Everybody had a different preference, top loading versus bottom loading. For top loading, the team chose pass load and felt that the two steel rail guides facilitated really smooth nail loading and was way more durable than the rest. For bottom loading, the team felt that Milwaukee was superior and that the nail pusher release button was the easiest and most accessible to use. We looked at contact tips. Having a well-designed contact tip ensures the nailer does not slip and prevents it from being installed correctly or incorrectly. The best contact tip in this test was Senko. The Senko stood alone in this pack, because it provides a 360-degree coverage around the firing head and has way more complex tangs to actually grip the material that you're nailing it to without limiting access to tighter spaces. Other nailers with great contact tips were Milwaukee, Rigid, and Bostitch. Rounded and aggressive, these contact tips quickly gripped all the materials we tested and were consistent in performance. Now, during the testing, we noticed that the Metabo HPT contact tip didn't grab well at steeper angles, toenailing, things like that. The Craftsman Porta-Cable have identical tips. They're basically the same nailer and tangs, but the tangs weren't sharp. They were grounded flat. And we found them to slide on harder materials like Advantech and LVL lumber. One thing to note that we thought was kind of cool is the Bostitch is the only nailer that comes with a replacement tip that slides right out for positive placement nailing for metal connectors. That was cool. All right, let's talk about depth adjustment. Makita, Milwaukee, and Rigid stood out. They had the best placed smoothest to operate depth of drive knob adjustment. On the Makita, we like the visible scale that allows you to see the range, the adjustment range. The Milwaukee and the Rigid both have large adjustment wheels. It's hard to know where in that depth adjustment you are as compared to the other nailers. You kind of have to figure it out. Senko's big knurled knob adjustment was the easiest to operate, and the adjustment was smooth. Its only negative was that it is directly in the line of sight for users. For the pass load, an old school onboard Allen wrench is necessary for depth adjustments. Most of the nailers today have toolless adjustment dials or knobs. The Bostitch also sports a unique toolless slide adjustment, and that gives the user the benefit of speed, especially on the extreme ends of the adjustment. But we found that the Bostitch adjustment tip can come right out, and it can completely come out and get lost, especially if you're on the far end of an adjustment. The team felt that the nailers that had dial adjustments it's a newer, tried and true design. They're also more sensitive to minor tweaks, and they liked it better than the Bostitch slide. We looked at clearing jams. Most jams are caused by nails and debris and part of the nail jamming the driver blade in the guide, the nail guide. The Senko was the only nail that has a single bolt on the magazine, and it's like a removal procedure that allows you to slide the magazine out and clear jams. An adjustable wrench, pair of pliers allow you to loosen the bolt and just remove it, slide it right out of the way. It's an easy jam clearing procedure. This unique feature was simple, and like I said, it was so easy to use. We were impressed. We looked at firing modes. All the nailers were capable of single fire or sequential bump firing. Milwaukee had the best combination of ease of use and safety. Makita was a very close second. Both nailers switch fast between firing modes by just simply rotating the switch. Milwaukee has a locking rotating, so you push and twist. Makita just has a simple switch that twists. No lock or secondary actuation when you rotate that. The Portacable, Craftsman, and the Rigid have trigger selector switches, but it requires a two-handed operation. You have to kind of push from one side and rotate. Not that easy to use. Craftsman and Portacable also have a trigger safety lockout button. The Bostitch, Passload, and Senko tools require the trigger to be swapped out and change firing modes. And while this isn't ideal for do-it-all framing guns, it's pretty typical for framers who pretty much use task-specific nail guns, and they mostly operate in bump mode, so it's good for them. Rafter hook. 3 of the nail guns have metal hooks. It was the Passload, the Senko, and the Makita. The team felt that the Passload had the best hook. It's spring-loaded. It's about 2.5 inches wide opening, reversible 180-degree swing with 3 detent positions. The Senko has a 2-inch rafter hook, and it's smaller profile and rounded, and it seems almost suited for a ladder rung. It's almost like an afterthought. The Senko rotates 180, but it is not reversible. Makita has a fixed metal hook that is reversible by removing 2 screws, and it's fixed. It has 2 fixed width positions, 1.5 inches and 2.5 inches wide. Team found the Makita hook was sturdy, durable, and reliable. I personally liked it a lot. While we're not a fan of plastic hooks, the Milwaukee and the Bostitch were the best plastic hooks. Milwaukee was beefy plastic hook. It had 1.5 inch opening. Hook has some flex in it, but did swivel easily. Bostitch was a shorter hook with locking indents, and it's positioned higher up on the gun, so it sits different, and it was easy to use. The Metabo HPT nailer that we tested did not come with a rafter hook, although other HPT nailers do. The Rigid. The Rigid rafter hook was easy to swivel, but the team felt that the hook material was too narrow, and it flexed a little bit too much. Also, it barely fit over 2x lumber. It's thinner and less durable. All right, we looked at dry fire lockout. Dry fire lockout prevents a nailer from firing when out of nails, and it protects the tool and the material. Bostitch is the only nailer that did not have a dry fire lockout, and we marked it down for that. The team felt that dry fire lockout is an important feature and one that pros prefer. We looked at quickly, not long, at no-mar tips. Our crew members have never used a no-mar tip on a framing nailer ever. But I suppose if you were maybe building a deck out of PT lumber or installing that horrible T111 siding or something like that, maybe you would want to protect the wood surface and use a no-mar tip. That said, the nailers with no-mar tips had horrible storage capacity and they all fell off, guaranteed to get lost. We did not score this category. We looked at weight and size. The winner of that category was Metabo HPT. So the length, width, and height of the nailers were used to determine their cubic volume, and the rank was assigned based on that volume and tool weight. The Metabo HPT was the smallest and lightest nailer we tested, and its size was a favorite among the team. Coming in at second place was Milwaukee, followed by Makita. Okay, we looked at nail magazine capacity. The winner of that was the Metabo HPT. For a full-size framing nailer, most folks will agree with us that you want to have at least a two-strip nail capacity. So of all the nailers that we tested, they all hold 2 strips. Some held a little bit more than others, that's all. Noise and decibels. We measured decibels, and we did it during our LVL testing and recorded the results at a consistent distance, waist height distance. These nailers were all extremely close, so we did not use it as a ranking, especially since we're not using professional equipment. It's important to note that all of these nailers require hearing protection. And we do list a chart so you can see those rankings. Ergonomics. So the winner of Ergonomics was Makita and Milwaukee. The nailers essentially are the same from an ergonomic standpoint, but 3 of the nailers, I guess, of the crew stood out as top contenders. It was Makita, Milwaukee, and Metabo HPT. And so what we did is we looked at how the tool interfaced with the user concerning things like, well, concerning 5 categories, basically. We looked at grip, rafter hook, ease of firing, ease of depth adjustments, and balance. Each tool we ranked, we did it again on a 1 to 5 scoring range. The team did this. All 3 nailers that I just mentioned had superior nail mode selector switches. The Makita and the Milwaukee had easier to use depth adjustments. The Metabo HPT had a clear line of sight, but the awkward placement of the depth of drive adjustment was a trade-off. The location of that depth of drive does result in that nailer having a better line of sight, and left or right user. The Makita and Milwaukee tied first place in ergonomics and pretty much well ahead of the pack. They came in 7 points ahead of Metabo HPT, 9 points ahead of pass load, and 10 plus points ahead of the rest of the team, the rest of the nailers. Another test that we looked at was toenailing. So the winner of toenailing was Senko. Remember we told you they had a really aggressive head. When toenailing, you know, the nailers held approximately at 60 degrees, and many framing nailers, the contact tip slips in these situations. So nailers with a more aggressive tip typically toenail better. And for toenailing framing applications, we used 3.5-inch nails, and we fastened 2x4 KD framing at an angle to each other. The Senko had the best tip. It has a claw-like superior tip that just is aggressive and toenails well, and it has tons of power to toenail. Milwaukee also has an aggressive tip and is also powerful. It's solid and it has consistent toenailing every single time. Bostitch had plenty of power, aggressive tip, cast tip, by the way, all cast. And Makita did well as well. It sank toenails extremely well, consistent, super powerful, and a very smooth nailer. But would like to see a more aggressive tip for toenailing because it does slide a little bit. Metabo HPT is a smaller nailer of all of them and easily fit between studs. The contact tip was aggressive and gripped well. The team found that the Metabo HPT was slightly underpowered with inconsistent toenailing penetration. Now let's talk about the rigid. The rigid nailer did not perform well in our toenailing test. Power wasn't the issue, and this nailer did extremely well in the other tests. The rigid nailer was not able to sink toenails even at maximum depth setting, and with the nose firmly buried into the wood. We're not really sure why. All right, heavy duty framing LVL application. This was a power test. The winner of that was Senko, and in this application, we used 3.5-inch framing nails to fasten LVL headers together. We placed 2 3/4 inch thick LVLs together with a 2x8 underneath, and we face nailed. Each nailer installed a series of 10 fasteners to compile an average measurement for nail penetration. We used the same compressor on all of the tests, and we cycled the compressor every time to achieve maximum tank pressure prior to starting each and every test. During the evaluation of power testing, the nailers were evaluated in 2 ways. So the first way we tested was we tested the nailers to approximately their mid-depth of drive. And we did that setting to get a sense of average depth of drive in the mid-range. And the second was we tested them we tested them at full depth of drive. So we set full depth of drive and we looked at their maximum depth and we measured each. Now, the tests were done, or were run, I should say, multiple times, and the results were compiled and the average determined. So I'll show you a chart in a sec. The chart basically gives the average depth of drive in inches. And like I said, it's an average run of these tests. The Senko had the best power and was able to consistently overdrive fasteners on every single nail that it installed. The Rigid, in terms of power, performed extremely well, coming in second. Following in third place was the Milwaukee, which had very low kickback, and it really impressed the team. Very powerful. We also did a medium duty application. And what I mean by that is this was more of a subjective application where we used 2.5-inch framing nails to fasten 3/4 inch thick Advantech sheathing to engineered studs, almost like flooring almost. We did find that all the nailers were able to perform this test and achieve full penetration, and very few nails were not fully seated. The Makita, Metabo, Senko, and Passload performed slightly better than the rest of the pack, but not enough to really create a score ranking. Framing contractors usually switch to coil nailers when they do sheathing applications like subfloors and walls and roofing. However, many carpenters own only one framing nailer. So in this situation, for those contractors, having the ability to adjust fastener depth when transitioning from framing walls to jumping to a sheathing application, it's important. And in this situation, depth adjustment hurt the older style tools that require Allen wrenches and versus using a toolless adjustment. We also looked at overhead application, and the winner of that was the Metabo HPT. And for the overhead application, our intent was to assess performance and ergonomics in overhead nailing. We installed 3/4 inch pine strapping, and we fastened it to LVL studs with 2.5-inch ring shank nails. No performance issues with fastening were noted on any of the nailers. The Metabo HPT, due to its lightweight design, was easier to position, maneuver, and obviously caused for less shoulder and neck fatigue. All the other nailers were heavy for this task. One issue that does stand out is this task is the added weight of the other nailers. So things like Bostage and Senko, we noticed the weight on those. The extra weight of these nailers, it can be a significant factor with user fatigue when using a tool for extended periods of time on something like nailing up ceiling strapping. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next we looked at pricing. The winner of pricing was Metabo HPT. Pricing fluctuates constantly, so keep in mind the pricing listed here was at the time that the publication came out. It may be different now. Pricing listed is from independent retailers that we trust that provide great service. So keep that in mind as well, because some lower prices, they may come from less reputable retailers or big box stores, and who knows. There was a tie on pricing, but for this test, we felt that the results were different enough that we could rank one over the other as a better outstanding tool. The Metabo HPT and the Porta-Cable tied at $199. The team felt that the best nailer of the two in almost all of the tests was the Metabo HPT, and we awarded it first place in this category. Coming in third place was the Bostage and Craftsman, both listed at $219. And it's important to understand that price is only one criterion in choosing the best nailer, with the overall performance topping the list, right? That makes the most sense. So who has the best framing nailer? The answer to that is Milwaukee. All the categories ranked were then totaled, right? We totaled them to determine the final score for the best full-size framing nailer. The Milwaukee framing nailer is not new, and its stellar performance surprised us. When it comes to pneumatic full-size framing nailers, the Milwaukee 7200-20 ranks at the top when it comes to power, performance, ergonomics, and features. It came in at a total of 16 total points, which was 6 points ahead of the second place Metabo HPT and 7 points ahead of the third place Makita. Both great nailers. So final thoughts, guys. Look, we get lots of comments about how we come up with these rankings. As we stated before, there are hundreds of ways to test tools, compare tools. If it was that easy, you'd be doing it, right? So the good news is we've openly shared all the data from all our tests. You can rank the tools however you want. If you don't like or don't care about how we did price or the price, no problem. Just take it right out of the matrix and re-rank them. Hopefully you find that this head-to-head was useful in comparing a wide range of full-size pneumatic framing nailers, and hopefully helps you make decisions in the future. I'm Rob Robillard. Please consider subscribing. Don't forget to follow Toolbox Buzz on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll see you next at the next head-to-head here at Toolbox Buzz.